If you're a high income earner, you want to watch this video. A lot of my students are actually high income earners, and the problem is I see the same 6 mistakes that they're all making. And this is coming from somebody that's actually amassed $2.2 million in net worth by the age of 31. So I know the game personally, but I've also worked with thousands of people, and they're making the same mistakes over and over again. So if you're a high income earner, you want to listen to this video. I'm gonna walk you through an example of a client making $300,000, and this is all confidential, so there's just numbers, there's no names. So in this example, after taxes, they are bringing home $17,500 per month. On an annual basis, that's around $210,000 a year. On an expense side, they're spending $16,750 a month on average, and they're only putting away or saving $750 a month. So technically speaking, they are zero-based budgeting. They have every dollar going somewhere, just not the right buckets. And this is the first mistake I see all high income earners make, is they do not budget because they've gotten away with it their whole entire life and they think they're okay until they see the numbers. And I'm gonna show you the exact numbers. So in this example, they are only saving 4% of their take-home pay. So $9,000 divided by 210,000 is around 4%. That's really sad, but this is why I often say I get most of my students to about a 20% minimum savings rate because of the process that we take them through. And typically it's 20% of gross income, but in this example, I'm gonna downplay this. I'm gonna say that you can only save 20% of your take-home pay. So that instantly goes from $9,000 on an annual basis to $42,000 on an annual basis. And that's an extra $2,750 a month on top of the $750 they're already saving. That's a $33,000 difference just by going through the program. And this is a massive find. Almost every one of my students finds in some sort of capacity. So just imagine you have an extra $2,750 available at your discretion. You can then look at your debts that you have. Let's just take an example. I'll throw it up on the screen. So a $50,000 debt at a 5.175% interest rate at a minimum payment of $534. Now enter an extra $2,750 per month. If you apply that to that debt solely, that takes that from a 10-year debt all the way down to 16 months, just over 1 year. You are almost saving 9 years in payments just alone by having the right system in place. And this is why all my students move so fast, because they get this system in place to where life becomes a lot easier and they have a lot more cash flow. They've always gotten away with it, but they haven't been maximizing their potential. Now, most high income earners that are lacking education think, wow, that's a big savings, $33,000 more per year. That's great. How do we do this? That's not the whole story. You should see how big this gets with compound interest and when the investments come into play. So number 2 is not understanding the investment game. I see this happen amongst high income earners all the time. Over the last 20 years, the average investor only returned about 3.6% return, where the S&P 500 returned about 9.7. So using the same situation, if they had that $3,500 pumping into the market, into the right vehicles, and they actually knew what they were doing, and they weren't the average investor, but they were the average market, the difference is $3.1 million over a 25-year period. That is obviously substantial. I don't need to explain this, but this is the difference of not knowing, of not taking the initiative right this second to get your finances in order, especially as a high income earner. In this example, we're looking at 4.9 minus $1.8 million. That is so crazy. So let's take this a step back to explain this math. So even if they just had that $750 invested in the right vehicles versus what they actually currently had it at, the difference is substantial. They would be able to grow that to almost $1.4 million over a 25-year period. But let's say they actually applied the system, brought more cash flow into their situation, and then invested that money. That money would turn to $3.8 million over a 25-year period. This is crazy. So when I say my students actually save 6 or 7 figures more than they did when they initially came into the program, there is no fabrication there. This is the cold hard truth. So we've already uncovered a ton of money, but here's the bigger thing. Number 3 is they spend way too much time into their finances. The average person is now spending over 6 hours more per month than they did in 2018 with their personal finances. They have all these apps, they have multiple sources of information, and they feel so confused because how wouldn't you feel confused when you have a million sources telling you different information? This is why my system is always going to work, because it's streamlined, it's simple, and everybody can follow it. And we spend 30 minutes per month on our finances, but we are 100x more efficient than the average person out there. Now, this is where it gets scary. A lot of high income earners want to rely on a financial professional and they want to go to an advisor and they don't understand the true cost. I'm going to show you. So let's take their old savings, which is $9,000 per year or $750 per month, and also their new savings with the $3,500 per month. And let's also assume they have $100,000 saved up and they're investing this $9,000 over the year and they're receiving 8%, but they're paying an advisor 2% all in, which is extremely normal. It's actually on the low end. Sometimes you can get up to 5%. You don't even want to know the numbers of that. So if you're paying an advisor 2% all in fee, you are spending around $420,000 over a 25-year period. But it gets even worse. So let's assume that we're actually investing the $3,500 per month and we're still paying the same amount of fee. That $420,000 goes to over $1 million in fees in an investment lifetime. So when I say you have to learn this stuff now, and whatever the cost is, it is worth it, you have to do it today. Or you can be my guest and spend over millions of dollars in fees because you're uneducated. So the fifth issue I see with a lot of high income earners are not understanding taxes. Now, as a CPA, I obviously understand taxes inside and out. One of the biggest things is related to investments and not understanding how to maximize the three buckets. Let's call it pre-tax, Roth, and taxable. Because what happens is grandma told us that investing our 401k all pre-tax was a great idea. Grandma has good intentions, but she's not a CPA like me. So therefore, little Johnny at 25 starts investing all of his money into his 401k pre-tax, and he gets to 65 and he realizes there's this thing called RMD. And at 72, he's gonna have to start forced withdrawing some of this money, and that's gonna be subject to tax. And he has no other buckets filled because he wasn't planning ahead of time. And you can't change this once it's too late. And that's the key. You have to make sure you're set up now because those investment accounts are going to compound with time. A lot of people know how to track up the hill, but they don't know how to come down. And they crash and burn on the way down with taxes, and they pay an exorbitant amount of fees to take care of that when they could have just educated on the front end, built their portfolios the right way, and then skied down that slope much smoother. But you can't help everybody. And number 6 is not having the proper insurances set around you. Now, there are a lot of insurances my students come across. I list about 10 to 11 within my program that you should specifically be focused on and seeing if they make sense for your situation. Term life insurance and disability insurance are the two most common that should be in your situation that are not in your situation, especially as high income earners. So let's break down both of these real fast. So for term life insurance in particular, I have an entire video explaining exactly how much you need for that. I'm gonna link that in the top right for you, but let me share a story for you real fast. I had a student come to me about 3 years ago. She came in, she was married. Unfortunately, her husband passed away. Condolences, we helped her out in a big way. However, she didn't have term life insurance and she was a school teacher, not making over 6 figures or even near it. And she had 3 kids, 12 to 15 years old. All 3 of those kids had to step up and start to build income at 12, 14, and 15 years old, unfortunately, to help out mom. You don't want to put yourself in that situation. You want to make sure the life insurance is going to cover in the event of a death, and nobody expects it until it happens. So be prepared. This is a disastrous thing for a family to have to deal with when they're mourning a loved one. Make sure you're financially prepared because the worst of the worst could happen. Secondly is disability, in particular, long-term disability. And no, term life insurance or disability through your work does not count. Take it out, get it from an independent broker outside of your workplace, and make sure that you're protected in case you lose your income from a disability. You might be thinking you're big alpha man, but the statistics say that 1 in 5 Americans will lose their job for a year or greater between 25 and 65. So don't take the chance that you're not going to be in that 20% because there is a probability that you will be. I don't want you to get caught up in that and not have an income for a year and be totally drained from without having a paycheck. And of course, I have another experience with a non-student that actually sent me an Instagram DM, and they told me that they lost their job and they were relying on the government now to handle everything. And they went from a very high income situation to living on food stamps within the government. Do not put yourself in that situation. Long-term disability and life insurance, term life in particular, are not expensive. My wife and I collectively pay under $100 to have $3 million in coverage from a life insurance perspective, and enough to supplement our income if in fact I were to become disabled. So those are the 6 issues I see high income earners make all the time. We're talking losing money at the 6 and 7 figure level, and the reason they put themselves in this position is because a spouse is holding them back. They're thinking it's not the right time, good luck with that, or they don't want to spend the money now because they have a cheap scarcity mindset that's only going to cost them 6 and 7 figure dollars down the road. Don't be that person, and I will see you next Monday.